back in the day, people would just have each other over for dinner or host these like dinner parties, and people would dress up and have like, wine and fancy foods and different courses. The initial intent was really to build new friendships through the dinner parties. She made a really beautiful distinction between hosting and entertaining, and how there's a difference. Just the act of opening your doors more will build that community up.
Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Woman Podcast. I'm your host, Mari Wagner, and I am so excited for today's episode. We are going to be speaking with Mari Wagner. She is a content creator, founder of the popular lifestyle brand West Coast Catholic, and a podcast host herself. Before we dive in and I tell you what today's episode is about, I would like to remind you guys we are now on YouTube, which I am so excited about, reaching a whole new audience of people there. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please go subscribe over there to boost us in the algorithm. Also, you guys, we have a little Facebook group. It is so fun for people to just come ask questions, meet other Catholic women. It's a hoot. That's all that I have to say. So all those will be linked in the show notes. And if you like my shirt today, if you're watching this on YouTube, if you're not, it's adorable. It's a little like pumpkin sweater because we're recording this in early November. So cute. It is from the Catholic Dress Co. And I know it's called the Catholic Dress Co., but she's got like sweaters, shirts, a ton of cute, modest, pretty affordable outfits. And it's just adorable. So go ahead and check them out at catholicdressco.com. All right, so today we are going to be chatting with Mari, and I am so excited because she has been doing an Instagram series that is all about monthly dinners. Every month she hosts a themed dinner for her friends, and it is just the cutest thing. It's been so inspiring for me to watch as someone who struggles to host in this season of life. So I wanted to chat with her and just ask all the tips, kind of get the inspiration, and help you guys in whatever season of life you're in to host, cultivate more community, and all of that. So, Mari, welcome to the show.
Hey, Mari, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to talk about this conversation today. Whenever I get asked to talk on podcasts, it's usually about how we started West Coast Catholic, which I love to talk about regardless. But rarely do I get asked to talk about hosting and hospitality, which is a huge passion of mine. So I'm really pumped for this conversation.
Me too. It has honestly been such an impactful series for me because I used to love to host a ton when we were first married. And honestly, just as life has gone on, I've let it fall to the wayside. And I recently saw a reel that re-inspired me. It was something like, how do you expect a village to show up for you if you're not someone else's village? And the gist of it was that if we're not cultivating that community, we're not showing up for other people, they're not going to show up for us. And I was like, man, that hurts. That's a gut punch, but it is so true. And I just have loved your series. So I'm like, I just want to talk to you about it. So let's just start with a general overview, especially for people who don't have Instagram or might not be following you yet. So you've been doing a series on Instagram where each month you host a themed dinner. And I would like to dive into the nitty gritty, but can you first explain what these dinners are and how you first got inspired to host them?
Yeah, totally. Well, I have come to really love hosting, cooking, decorating, kind of all these homemaking things since I got married. And I think in the past year or so, some reel popped up on my Instagram page of this huge like cooking content creator. Her name is Isabel Heinekens. I'll have to like tag her and send her to you. And she does these elaborate monthly dinner parties. And I mean, she's like a professional chef. So it's like still even a scale above what we do and everything. And it was just so fun for me to follow along and watch. And I was just inspired by her. And so I was like, you know what? I want to do this in my home for my community. And we had been having conversations about how to build community, how to build deeper friendships, and just how like we loved how it kind of seems this way. Like back in the day, people would just have each other over for dinner or host these like dinner parties, and people would dress up and have like, wine and fancy foods and different courses. And now everything is so casual, and there's nothing wrong with that. But there's just like a part of me that was like, I kind of want to bring this back, and this would just be really fun for us to love on our community and expand our community. So the initial intent was really to build new friendships. And through the dinner parties, we try and invite maybe like a couple that we know, and then a couple that maybe like they know that we don't know as well, but maybe we like mutually connected at an event or something, but we want to get to know them better, to kind of expand our network. We love to just love on our friends and our community in this way by providing a really fun experience for them. People have gotten like really excited about them. And then two, or I guess this is a third reason, really just to grow our hosting skills. Like it's definitely, a gift in some ways. Hospitality is a gift, but at the same time, there are things that you can do to practice and to grow your skill set. So it's been really fun just learning to host in different ways.
I love that. And I love how you mentioned growing your hosting skill, because it's a skill that needs to be learned and practiced. It comes more naturally to some people than others, but we can all learn to be a great host. So kind of diving into the nitty gritty, let's start with themes. You theme them each month. They're beautiful. How do you decide on themes? And then how do you take a conceptual theme, and style it into the food, the decor, all of that?
Yeah, totally. Well, I love Pinterest. I probably go on Pinterest just as much as I go on Instagram, and I just love gathering inspiration. So usually I'll start with looking for like seasonal aesthetic inspiration. I try to make it tie in with the season or something specific for that month. Maybe it's a liturgical season one month, or maybe it's just, fall another month. And so I kind of start looking for inspiration based off of either a season or a color palette that I feel like is tied in well to the season. And I start looking for table decor. I usually start with the tablescape and color scheme, and then I kind of build it out from there. And sometimes I'll see an image on Pinterest of one specific thing that I love, and so I'll kind of build the whole theme around that. So for October, for example, our dinner party was candlelit and cozy. And as I was looking for like fall dinners or like cozy dinner fall, this image came up of this centerpiece with all these pillar candles in different sizes, different heights. And I just thought that was so creative and still so simple, but like so cozy, and like all the candlelit created such an ambiance. And so I decided to build the whole thing around that. I'm like, great, we're going to do candlelit dinner. It's going to be a warm, cozy theme. And so I chose to find like a soup and like a brothy dumpling, kind of like first course, and roasted Brussels sprouts, and everything was kind of built around this like really warm, cozy foods. And that all kind of started with just finding an image of a bunch of pillar candles as a centerpiece. Or sometimes it'll be like, for example, in May, we wanted to do something to honor Mary for the month of Mary. And so I knew I needed to incorporate blues, really feminine and kind of like a royal feel for the Queen of Heaven. And so in that case, we started with the liturgical season and a color. And so I kind of looked on Pinterest for blue dinner aesthetic or blue and floral tablescape, different keywords like that all tied around the theme of the color, or the flowers that I wanted to do. And so that's kind of how I start out finding like the inspiration, the visuals, the tablescape. And then next, I usually come up with a theme name or like a name for the dinner party. And for that, I use ChatGPT. So I pull up ChatGPT and I tell it some information of like the vibes that I'm going for or the feeling, or maybe I already, know the tablescape, or I know one of the dishes that I want to do. And then it pops out a bunch of ideas for me. And I usually have to refine it a couple times, and then I find one that I love, and I'm like, great, that's it. That's our theme.
I love that. And I love that you use ChatGPT for that too. Interrupting this episode to tell you guys about White Lily Weddings, the one-stop Catholic wedding shop. They've built the ultimate toolkit for Catholic couples, starting with the Catholic Wedding Blueprint, a step-by-step system grounded in Catholic Church teaching. There's even an AI wedding planning bot trained in Catholic magisterial teachings and professional planning expertise. Basically, your 24/7 Catholic wedding planner that actually gets it. You'll also find a vetted vendor directory with trusted Catholic-friendly vendors, most who offer special discounts for White Lily wedding clients. some of even up to $1,000. Yes, you heard that right. Plus, they have mass program templates, customizable stationery and signage, and honestly, so much more. If you want your wedding planning to feel wholly joyful and organized, visit whitelillyweddings.com. That's white, Lily weddings.com to see why it's called the one-stop Catholic wedding shop. So that's how you find the theme and the decor. What about food? How do you take the theme and the decor and turn it into food that fits that? And also, how do you find good recipes? Because I know I struggle, like if I'm looking for, let's just say like a pumpkin soup, there are 5,000 pumpkin soup recipes online, and some of them are definitely better than others. So do you have go-to websites? What does it look like for you to create yummy food?
Yes. So again, I'll use a mix of ChatGPT, Pinterest, and my brain. Sometimes I'll know, okay, this is what I want to do for one of the dishes. Like for, let's see, for our June. No, no, no. For our July party, we ended up doing a lunch and it was an elevated picnic. We called it gingham and grazing. And I already knew the food. I wanted to take kind of classic picnic foods, but take it up a notch to a more elevated, delicious recipe than just a classic like sandwich or pasta salad, right? So for that, I kind of already knew what the food was. And then I used ChatGPT and Pinterest to kind of search up ways to elevate finger sandwiches or pasta salad or charcuterie or pie. And in terms of like building out the full menu, if I already know some of the pieces, again, I'll just use ChatGPT and tell it like, I know I want this as a main dish, or I want this as an appetizer, I want this as a dessert. And this is kind of the flavor profile I want it to fit. Like, what are some suggestions you have for appetizers or for the salad? And from there, I'll kind of refine to ingredients that I like to use or that I feel that fit well. And I would say it works most of the time. And I think at this point I've trained it to my dinner party, like to be my dinner party assistant. And so it kind of knows what I'm looking for. But at first it might take a little bit to be like, no, this isn't really something I would make. And then for recipes and websites, I would recommend like finding a couple anchor people or websites that you really trust that you can go back to. I love Half Baked Harvest. I've also loved Love and Lemons. I've also loved Delish or Epicurious. Those have been different websites that I have found have good recipes. Um, and it just kind of depends on what you're making, the level of like complexity or the number of ingredients that's used. Half Baked Harvest is always going to be more ingredient heavy. I have found that Epicurious isn't always as ingredient heavy, but it's always like really delicious and can be really elevated. So that's fun. And I've used ChatGPT. There's been some where I've kind of compared recipes and I've asked Chat like, okay, get me the recipe to this apple and parsnip soup. And then I'll kind of cross check that with other websites. And I try and just find websites or recipes that have like a lot of ratings, which means the recipe's been used multiple times, numerous times. And I kind of cross reference those and take what I like and leave what I don't.
That's awesome. That's super helpful. And I didn't even think of checking website ratings because you're right, a lot of recipe websites do have the option for people to rate that recipe. So that's a really good tip to check those out. So the cynic in me, which I'm a very cynical person, says we live in a tiny apartment and money is really tight. Like, how can we do this? Can you address those kind of people like me who maybe have the same concerns? Maybe they're concerned about not having a lot of space or not having a big budget to make these dinner parties happen, but they really, really want to do this. They want to cultivate community. I know I really do.
Yeah.
I don't know that I have the faith that I could pull it together.
Well, I think you do. I think first step is just trying to put the fear aside, right? Which is what we're going to help you guys do with some practical tips. I would say, first of all, space. I don't think space is that big of an obstacle. because the dinner party is pretty contained. We don't have to go to different rooms of the house. And you could just start by inviting one couple over if you don't have the space to seat multiple couples or multiple people. Just invite a few friends or one couple over. And you could even put your own spin on it, and it doesn't have to be a seated dinner. It could be an apps and drinks party that's kind of more like standing or around an island or around a bar top in your kitchen. And just by putting your own spin on it, like there's not that feeling of like, oh, we couldn't create a seated dinner party. Like the expectation is fun apps, people standing, or maybe like sitting in the living room while you serve up the next app in the kitchen, and just kind of more movement happening throughout the night instead of like everybody seated at a dinner table. And then you also don't have to make it elaborate. We have chosen to do this because it's almost like a hobby for me. It's like a way to flex a creative muscle that I love. And we've built it into our budget to be able to host these parties for community because we have prioritized that. But one thing I learned from another very, very much more seasoned homemaker than Emily Chapman, I had her on my podcast recently to talk about hospitality and hosting and all the things. And she made a really beautiful distinction between hosting and entertaining and how there's a difference. Both are good, but there is a difference. Like entertaining is essentially what we've been doing every month, like kind of like going to the nth degree and taking care of a bunch of little details and providing a more of an elaborate experience. Whereas hosting doesn't have to be that way. Hosting and hospitality can literally be having someone over for coffee and muffins. And that can be really beautiful and intentional as well. And when you just like add a quote unquote theme to it, like that elevates the experience in itself and makes people excited about the experience in itself. So, for example, we went to a newly married couple's home the other day. They just bought their first house and had kind of like a home warming party, and they called it like coffee shop, like welcome to our weekend coffee shop. And all they did was serve coffees and muffins. And it wasn't like expensive or elaborate at all. It wasn't fancy, but there were a lot of people there and people were just excited to kind of be part of this quote unquote like home coffee shop. So just by adding kind of like that theme to it and providing one or two homemade things, that can be special enough. It doesn't have to be a 4-course meal. And I'll say the other thing too, like you don't have to cook everything from scratch. If that's something you love to do and it brings you joy, go for it. But you could also buy store-bought muffins and make coffee at home and just serve them on a pretty plate or something to kind of elevate the look a little bit, and it'll be just as beautiful.
That's a really good point. And I love that you made a distinction, and I know it was Emily who ultimately made the distinction between hosting and entertaining, because I love the idea of entertaining and I would like to do that, but maybe just starting with simply hosting a party. And we have literally 4 chairs and a tiny dining table, but we could do, like you said, couches around our little island. We could find creative ways to do it like that. Start as hosting with the goal of eventually in a few years be able to truly do like full entertaining. That would be really fun. Another question I have, I'm not too much of an introvert, but I know there are introverts who crawl at the idea of initiating hosting other people in their space. So what tips do you have for them for breaking out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, totally. My recommendation here would be start out with inviting a close friend that you have or close couple friends. If it makes you really nervous, you want to get into it and you're trying to break out of your shell more, don't start by inviting a bunch of people you don't know, because that might really raise the stakes for you. Start out by inviting a close friend, maybe for coffee after mass or a brunch after mass, someone that you're already familiar with and have a good relationship with, just to kind of take a little bit of that stress off, and you can focus more on like, okay, what is the experience of hosting and providing food and a comfortable space, instead of like the worry of, I don't know how to interact with this person, or I'm nervous about what to talk about. It kind of removes a layer of anxiety. Tip number 2 would be to cook food that you already know how to make or feel confident making, so there's less stress rather than trying new recipes in the kitchen. That can be a source of stress for a lot of people, not knowing how the food's going to turn out, or if something doesn't turn out right and then you have to serve it, then you feel, embarrassed that it didn't turn out right. So stick to some of the dishes that you already know, or again, like I said, you can always buy food and provide it in your home. And maybe just do like a fun drink instead of like making like a whole elaborate thing. And then too, I think this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, like hosting versus entertaining. Redefine what hosting means to you and kind of restructure that vision and that idea in your mind. Because if we have this really intimidating vision of hosting, it's going to seem that way, right? But if we kind of bring it down and we're like, okay, it doesn't have to be a big production. It can be tea at my house, or it can be like, yeah, coffee after mass, then it'll kind of bring that anxiety down as well.
I love that. And you mentioned having anxiety about starting conversations with people you're not super familiar with. And I know a big point of these dinner parties is to really cultivate that community, create those relationships. This is something I struggle with, is initiating good conversation with people. And I was actually just at a women's conference this past weekend where the main speaker was talking all about how we don't go deep anymore. It's Mother Teresa who says we have a poverty in the West because we just don't have the connection relationships with people like a lot of the rest of the world does. Even though we're so materialistic, we're not, physically poor. We are spiritually and emotionally and relationally poor in the West, especially in the United States. And so I really struggle with, and I know a lot of people too, initiating those conversations that go beyond the surface level, getting really deep with someone, not in a weird way, but having those tough conversations that really help you connect, cultivate that relationship. And I know it's an overtime thing. I think the average is it takes like 50 hours or something like that to create a friend. Don't quote me, but there is research about
Wow.
that. And so obviously you're not going to do it over one dinner party, but I do think it's important to learn the skills on how to have good conversations with people that are just beyond service level, like how was your day? What do you think of this weather? All of that kind of stuff. So do you have any tips for people about starting those good conversations, going beyond the surface level in a way that's not cringe?
Totally. Yeah. I think that's a super valid question and a common concern a lot of people have, or a common struggle that people face, especially with new relationships. Trey and I, okay, before I say that, I'll just say part of hospitality is thinking of your guest, right? Thinking of them particularly. What's going on in their life? What are they doing these days? Or like, what do they like? So asking ahead of time for food, this is kind of a side note on, not on conversations, but also just on the note of like thinking of your guests, always asking ahead of time, like, are there any dietary restrictions? And just really making your guests feel thought of, before the actual party. But when it comes to conversations, Trey and I will usually chat about it while we're prepping some of the food. And we'll be like, okay, like, what do we know about this couple that's coming? What's going on in their life? Maybe did they just switch jobs, or did they just have a new baby, or did they move, or do they have a side project going on that we know about, but maybe don't know a lot about? And we'll kind of come up with some of the themes that we want to bring up in conversation in case we feel like we need to. We don't like necessarily plan out the whole conversation before people get there, but it's just kind of like if there's gaps in the conversation and we want to fill with more conversation, we'll kind of have those in our back pocket of like specific things to ask about. And I think the key here too is two things. One is to have, well, when you have that question in the back of your mind, like think of follow-up questions as well. And the same, yeah. Think of follow-up questions as well. So like when you ask about like, oh, like how is the new job going? Or are you planning on switching? Or how is work going? When they answer, it doesn't just end there, but you kind of ask a little bit deeper about that experience, or about how they feel about the new job move, or how it compares to their last job, or, just kind of follow-up questions to really expand on the conversation. And in the same way, when they ask you a question, try and expand on your answer instead of just giving short answers. So if somebody even asks you the simple question of, how have you guys been lately? Or how was your day? Or what's new? Don't just respond and be like, oh yeah, we're doing great. Thanks for asking. Because that immediately just kind of cuts the conversation short and doesn't provide more detail. So you can share a little bit about like how you guys are actually doing, allow there to be a little bit of vulnerability, and then talk about what's been going on in your life. Like, what have you been up to the past week? And how was that trip that you took? Or, maybe you are stressed about what work looks like right now and you're working on a big project. And just kind of providing more details when people ask you even the simple questions will allow for more just not necessarily like intimate, but more intentional conversation. That show like I really care about your life. I'm not just asking because it's a cordial thing to ask. And then two, I would also think about, is there an intentional question that you can tie into the theme somehow? So we've only really done this for like more liturgical dinners, but in May we did a Marian themed dinner party, like I said, and then in June we did one for the Sacred Heart because we couldn't do one for Mary in May and then not one for Jesus in June. So for example, for our May dinner party, after some conversation and people were eating and into their dinner, we then asked, what are ways Mary has shown up in your life and how has that, progressed your relationship with Mary? And so we all kind of went around the table and just shared different ways that we had a relationship with Mary or different ways that Mary has shown up in our lives. And that was a really beautiful and intentional conversation that opened the door for a little bit of more vulnerability and deeper friendship.
I love that. And I think one thing that I'm hearing is that it takes a lot of intentionality. You're preparing for this beforehand and you're getting out of yourself thinking about the other person. I think that's something that we really struggle with in the United States a lot, is to get out of our own selves and ask someone how they're doing really. And then also to answer that question, honestly, when someone asks that of you, it is hard to be a little bit vulnerable. And you don't have to spill all of your dirty laundry and all that stuff. But it is good to go beyond the surface level, open up a little bit to someone. And as you grow that relationship, you can open up more and more. But I think that was super helpful. Planning those questions in advance, thinking about who you're inviting and planning those questions would totally give me, and I'm sure other people, more confidence to create those conversations so there's not just a lull in the dinner and you don't really know what to talk about. So I really love that. I have another question for you. Now that we've kind of talked about a lot of the logistics of the dinner, what is the best thing that you've seen come from these dinners? Because you've done 5 of them now, if you've been doing them since May. What's the best thing that has come from these dinners, in your opinion?
Yeah, truly, I think just it's deeper friendships and kind of opening our network a little bit. We've invited couples that we weren't super close with, and now we've seen them consistently over the past like 2 months because we invited them, 3 months ago to our dinner party. So kind of building better friendships, as well as just providing really fun experience and memories for our friends that we invite. And sometimes it's even something that people bring up later, like, oh, wow, like that dinner party was so fun. Or that couple we met on that dinner party, like, can you send me the wife's number? I really want to connect with her. So it's also kind of a way to help other people build community and introduce people. Because there was a dinner party we did in August where we knew both couples, but they didn't know each other. But I just felt like they would really connect. And so in that case, it wasn't necessarily like we were meeting new people, but we helped them meet new people. And now I think the 2 gals are in a different Bible study together. And yeah, we helped them make a new friendship as well. So I really just think it's expanding our network, building community, like I said, and just creating really fun memories for our guests and in our friend group. And then for me personally, it's been so much fun, but I do feel like I've gained more confidence in the kitchen. I think that there's been certain times where, like I said before, like I'm cross-referencing like multiple recipes, and then I'm learning to make a call on what I think is best based off of what I've learned from cooking different recipes or baking different things or making different desserts. I'll kind of start to learn little techniques and tricks and be like, well, I actually know that like when you whip egg whites, like this is what you have to do, but the recipe doesn't call for this. So I'm going to shift this a little bit, or and kind of making different calls like that. It's helped me gain a little bit more confidence in the kitchen and yeah, kind of making my own calls when comparing different recipes.
I love it. 2 follow-up questions that popped in my head. One, do you only invite Catholic couples, or how do you find the people? I mean, I know you said you find them in like groups and stuff, but is it only Catholic couples you invite? Do you invite physical neighbors? How do you choose your guests like that?
Yeah, we don't necessarily just invite Catholic couples. I will say it's just kind of the area that we live in and the community we're plugged into is mainly Catholic, young Catholic couples and young Catholic families. So most of them have been, but we do have a couple, just like Christian, like Protestant friends that we plan on inviting to some future parties. So I wouldn't say like it's necessarily Catholics only. And we've only done 2 liturgical themed dinners. So not all the dinners are like tied into the church's calendar. So it's not like it would be out of line, with someone's lifestyle and faith. And then What was your second question to that?
Well, my second question is, what is Trey's role in all of this? Does he enjoy it? What does he think of these dinners?
Yeah, he loves it too. I mean, we both love cooking and both have really come to love hosting. And I feel really lucky and blessed that my husband loves doing that. I mean, just even in our day to day split up meals and cooking pretty evenly in our home, at least right now. We have the ability to kind of do that evenly, and he's really great in the kitchen too. So I don't really have any concerns ever about him cooking anything, and we usually cook it together and split it up depending on which recipe we're each most excited to make. I'll handle all the decor, designing the invitations and making the invitations to the friends. We'll usually chat about it before, like who we want to invite. And then day of, Trey will help cook, and then he usually always makes like the special drink if we have one. But yeah, he's super helpful in the process, and he loves to do it.
That's so fun. I love all of that. And I know every husband's different, but I was just curious what your experience with that is with your husband. So wrapping up, this was so awesome. I'd love to have you back on in the future for another homemaking episode, but we're hitting 30 minutes, and I like to try to keep the episodes to that. What would you leave listeners with if you could just give them one piece of advice based on today's episode for, entertaining or hosting? What would that be?
Yeah, I would just say like open your doors. It doesn't have to be for a dinner party or a specific event. I would just say open your doors more. I read this Christian hospitality book a couple years ago, and I think I've read it like twice at this point, maybe 3 times. And the biggest theme of the book was our culture now is so afraid to welcome people into their home because it feels too vulnerable. It feels like our homes aren't good enough, or there's a lot of comparison with other people's family life or home life or the way they decorated their house or how new their furniture is. And I just want to say, like, people remember how you made them feel. People don't come into your home and critique the way you've decorated your home, or if you found your couch on Facebook Marketplace versus Pottery Barn. You know what I mean? So rid yourself of those lies and just start opening your doors more. Like I said, one of the easiest invitations is just after Mass. Like, do you want to come over for coffee after Mass? And we'll just keep the conversation going, or start inviting people on a random Tuesday night or Wednesday night just for pizza or pasta, like something really casual and chill. And just the act of opening your doors more will build that community up and do exactly what you were saying, Marie, of just like being that village for the people that you want to be a village to you as well.
Love that. Mari, where can people find you and connect with you more?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at mari.c.wagner. And then West Coast Catholic, my Catholic lifestyle brand, is at West Coast Catholic on Instagram. You can also find us at westcoastcatholic.co for our website. And then if you want to hear more podcast episodes, I have a podcast called Ever Be that you can listen to on Spotify and Apple and all the things.
Love it. And I do have to say, West Coast Catholic just had the cutest Christmas drop. So if you're listening to this shortly after this episode releases, you have to go check it out because it is adorable. Love it all. It's perfect for Advent and Christmas. So go check that out. Thank you everyone for listening today and tuning in. If you made it this far, I would love if you could leave the show a 5-star review to help bump us in the algorithm. Share it with a friend who you think would find this helpful, especially around the holidays. I feel like this is perfect. So share this with someone who's hosting, share this with your friends, and just be the open door community that Mari has been talking about in this episode. Thank you so much, you guys, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.